Hey, folks. Today, I couldn't be more excited to welcome a best-selling author of dystopian fiction. Mark Goodwin is joining us. He is from prepperecon.com. He's an amazing author. I've read everything he's written. I'm stoked. Join us. Stand by in a minute.
In 2013, I coined the name Grampian, and I gave it to your host, Jim Tracy.
Mark Goodwin, I am so excited to have you on the show. As I said before, best-selling author, I think 44-ish books and counting. Probably depends on when you count. Conference speaker, host of the Prepper Recon podcast. Haven't done that in a while though. But you're a Christian, a Jesus follower, a Bible student, and lots of other stuff. You help people prepare for uncertain times, which I think are certain, and those times are coming. But you're an Amazon best-selling author in lots of categories. Welcome to the Grampian, man. We are so happy you're here.
Oh, Jim, thanks so much for having me, and thanks for that very generous introduction.
That wasn't generous, man. I know how hard it is. I have actually written a book, and it actually came out this week. But I know how what a labor of love it is, especially. But does it get easier as you get more under your belt?
I don't know. You kind of get your chops, where you start to you kind of get in a flow of things. But I don't know if it gets easier because you still have to come up with the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what kind of research do you put into your books?
Oh, wow. A lot of podcasts, a lot of, listening to a lot of podcasts, a lot of reading, a lot of books, a lot of nonfiction.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't read a lot of, I don't read a lot of fiction. I read most of the stuff I read is nonfiction.
Yeah. Because sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction, right?
Oh, wow. It's hard. It's hard to compete with and getting harder,
Yeah. Yeah. And all the stuff on
you can't make up stuff wilder than what's going on.
and it doesn't matter if it's political or environmental and we're going to get into some of those topics because all of those tell us a bit about tell us a bit about the genre and what drew you into what I'll call for right now, hopefully correctly, dystopian nonfiction or fiction. I'm sorry.
I guess post-apocalyptic. I think a lot of people would call it post-apocalyptic fiction.
Okay.
Yeah. Dystopian that's kind of like, it's years after whatever event has happened and there's some oppressive government that's in. And yeah, I get into that sometimes. There's usually an oppressive government because that's 99 times out of 100, that's what you're going to get is when you get government, it's going to be oppressive. It's attractive to, it's just the people that are attracted to that, there's not a whole lot of Rand Pauls and Ron Pauls and Thomas Masseys. There's a lot more, Lindsey Grahams and that sort.
Yeah.
That are attracted to that particular job.
Okay. So what drew you into post-apocalyptic fiction?
Oh, wow. So after the great financial crisis, 2008, I really kind of woke up to the fact that I didn't understand how our economy worked at all. And I didn't understand finance and money and any of that. So I started diving into the cause of that, and I saw how fragile it all was. And my degree is in accounting, and it's something they don't teach you in high school or or college if you're not in some kind of accounting or finance. You don't learn about the fractional reserve system where banks actually create money. They just lend it into existence. If they've got $100, if you put in $100, they can lend out 1,000 on that 100 because they only have to have a 10% reserve. Or right now, I don't think there's any. After COVID, there was at one point there was no reserve. I don't know what the reserve requirements are right now, but I think they may still be sort of suspended, and they're just at liberty to just create as much money as they possibly can through lending. And so learning about all of that, just I saw the system as unstable, and when I started looking at debt and monetary creation, and when the Fed speaks, or when you hear numbers tossed around, they like to talk about the M2 money supply, which since COVID is gone up 50%, it's at 22 trillion. But what they don't talk about is the debt. All U.S. debt exists as U.S. treasuries. People hold U.S. treasuries as a form of money. So when you're counting money, you've got to add both of those. So it's 22 trillion plus 37 trillion. That's closer to the actual money supply, because if you think about U.S. treasuries are not counted in M2 money supply. But your checking account is. So if you're getting 0% interest in your checking account, and you move that into a 1-month treasury through Treasury Direct, where after it matures, it just drops right back into your checking account, where you're getting 4%. A lot of people, the same money that was in their checking account doing nothing, they've put into Treasury Direct. So it's still exactly the same money, and one's counted in M2 and the other one's not. So we have to add that debt into to the M2 to get the actual money supply, which would be closer to 59 trillion.
Yeah.
So when you start thinking about that much money chasing a very limited amount of goods and services, then it's pretty easy to see why kids today can't afford a house, why cars have doubled, why eggs are close to $10 a dozen if you're buying organic eggs, and why you can't fill up a grocery cart for $500 anymore. And so if you think about what's happened over the last 10 years, and you project that forward into the next 10 years, then that's going to give you, that's kind of the best case scenario of where we're going. So I guess that was a long answer to a short question.
Well, you were concerned about where we were going on a financial level,
right?
And a lot of your series, and I guess we got to talk about series a bit instead of about books, because a lot of the series are about, or they begin with, one financial collapse or another.
Right.
And what do you think now you've got the benefit of a decade or more than a decade of hindsight in writing, and you must have some kind of an idea which is more probable, I guess, now.
Yeah. So, they've all kind of revolved around this idea of flirting with hyperinflation. Even the ones where that's not really even the actual catalyst. Yeah. I still kind of figure that in there, because that's, to me, that's the thing that we have to prepare for, because it's baked into the cake, and it's unfixable, and there's nobody in government that has any plans of making any realistic cuts. We just saw Doge identify
billions,
200 billion in waste, fraud, and abuse. And what just got sent to Congress to actually cut out of the budget from the Doge waste is 9 billion. And then that just becomes that just gets drowned out as a rounding area when you look at the $300 billion increase that Trump and Hegseth are requesting for the defense budget. They want to take it from last year's was $700 billion, and I think it's getting $150 billion increase this year, and then they're asking for another $150 billion increase for next year, so that it would be for fiscal year 2026 would be an even $1 trillion for our defense budget. So a lot of that could be solved by minding our own business. I know a lot of people think that we should be the policemen of the world, and and once we get our money in order and we're living within our means, then maybe that's a conversation we can have, whether we should or whether we shouldn't. But right now it's a money problem and we can't. It's like, should we or shouldn't we go on vacation? Well, we've got.
I got a plastic card.
We're upside. We're upside down on our mortgage. We owe more than the house is worth. We're upside down on the car. We owe more on the car than it's worth, and we've maxed out the credit cards going to restaurants every weekend.
Right.
It's not a conversation of whether we should or shouldn't go on vacation. We can't. There's no money.
Yeah. You're sounding a bit like Dave Ramsey.
Yeah. Well, he's pretty good when it all the way up to the investment part. But as far as the getting out of debt and building up an emergency fund and all of that kind of stuff, that's certainly
great idea.
One of the main pillars of preparedness, especially for what we've got coming. If you're with the doubling of prices, a lot of people's standard of living just got cut in half.
Yeah.
And I think over the next 10 years, best case scenario, it gets cut in half again. So the best thing you could possibly do is front run that by cutting out any unnecessary expenditures right now and figure on saving as much as you can to have as a buffer for what's coming. But unlike Dave, I think that gold's probably a better place to keep that money than the stock market or certainly better than fiat cash.
But mutual funds. Yeah.
Gold and Bitcoin.
You've been feeling pretty good about your $800 gold if you bought it then, right?
Yeah, you are, right?
Yeah, for sure. So when you talk about preparedness, you bring up the B's, and I'm not going to get them all, but Bible is certainly at the front of that. But then you've got beans and bullets and bullion, and fill us in on that and the why.
Oh, yeah. So, first and foremost, folks need to make sure they're right with God, because at the end of the day, statistics tell us, despite their best efforts, 10 out of 10 people die. And the Bible says all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. That's Mother Teresa, Hitler, and everybody in between.
Right.
And the Bible also says the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life. And it says, if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved.
Be, not might be, right?
Right. And when you confess and believe, you start a relationship with God. But like all relationships, it needs to be maintained. And that's almost impossible without reading the Bible. If you've never read it before, you start with the New Testament. Then you find a church that teaches the Bible exactly as it's written. The second they start making excuses for why the Bible doesn't mean what it says, get out of there and find somewhere else. And then
absolutely.
And so yes, we're all gonna die. We're all gonna be standing face to face to our Creator, and either we're gonna have the blood of Jesus covering our sins, or we're gonna be cursed for eternity.
Yeah, the beginning of forever of bad days.
Yeah,
the worst days.
Yeah. But this also gives you a lot of peace for, the troubling times that we're living in. People are on so much medication and Prozac and they just don't know what to do with themselves. And the Bible fixes that, right?
Yeah.
And it gives you
peace that
hope,
passes
because you've got hope, and you've got Jesus with you, walking you through all those storms. Once that's covered, you get yourself in shape, and that's one of the B's, body, body, mind. So this is all part of body, mind, and soul, which is kind of before you get into the beans, bullets, and Band-Aids, you got to get all this stuff fixed,
Yeah.
And because if you can't get off the couch, you're just not going to make it.
Yeah.
But getting yourself in shape, that's mostly diet and exercise. You got to get away from these seed oils. These things are inflammatory. Most of the diseases we're dealing with in the Western world are based on inflammation, and that comes from seed oils, all the artificial dyes. Maybe RFK Jr. gets that out, maybe he doesn't.
Hey, but you could today, if you're sitting here and listening, and you just like swap for avocado oil or olive oil, pure cold pressed oil.
Yeah.
You're going to be better off immediately.
Yeah. You don't have to give up all the chips and the the little comfort foods. There's companies that make avocado oil chips. Clancy's has got one. Siete chips, they've got them.
Sure.
But you cut out those bad oils, those seed oils, cut out the dyes, sugar and high fructose corn syrup, soy, genetically modified foods that have been hosed down with petrochemical fertilizers and pesticides. You get away from that. Get away from meat.
It's
and
easy
dairy.
to say goodbye to Monsanto if you decide.
Yeah, you get away from meat and dairy, from animals that are fed all that garbage and injected with antibiotics. It's and you start with one thing and you get that out, and then you start with another thing, get that out. But if you do all of that, you might find that you can start reducing your dependency on all your prescriptions. And I realize this is the Grampian podcast, and we probably got some boomers, some Gen Xers.
Boomer or two.
yeah. I'm a Gen Xer, and and I get it.
I'm not holding it against you.
And sometimes it's not the age, but it's the mileage, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
But surgery and pharmaceuticals should be the last ditch effort after every other alternative solution has been explored and failed, but instead that's the medical industry's first line of defense. It's not healthcare, it's sick care is what it is. Yeah. I had
symptom care.
Yeah. I had early onset arthritis on my hands and my knuckles. I changed my diet, with corn syrup and sugar kind of being like the main culprits for that arthritis. I'm completely asymptomatic now for the arthritis. And
awesome.
And then about 7 years ago, I developed shoulder impingements, which is a lot to do with like typing all day and driving and just kind of having that forward position with your arms. It's a type of repetitive strain injury, and and that wasn't something that diet was really helping. I tried physical therapy, chiropractor, kinesiology, myofascial unwinding. I'd get a little bit of relief, but the problem just kept getting worse. And I was getting to the point where I couldn't sleep, or I'd only sleep a few hours at night because of the pain. And, I was thinking, okay, this might be something I'm going to have to, try surgery, because I've tried everything else. And then last October, I discovered Rolfing, and keep in mind, I'd been praying, God, help me get through this. I need my shoulders. This is just give me the wisdom. Show me how to get through this. And James tells us, if you ask for wisdom, you believe, God's going to give it to you
with the right motive.
Right. Yeah. So last October, I discovered roughing, which it's a type of deep tissue manipulation that brings the structure of your bone and tissue back into balance. And
Mm-hmm.
roughing it's been absolutely life changing for me. So 6 months
Awesome.
later, I'm sleeping without pain. I'm able to run the chainsaws and all the stuff that I'd had to really back off of, um, or nearly given up. So um, I've really gotten a lot of my life back over that.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah. So
So,
yeah, that's
some more of the bees.
yeah. So the next one's budget. I think we talked about that a little bit. Um, whatever you absolutely don't need, you need to cut it to survive what's coming.
Yeah.
And then what
Mm-hmm.
do you do with those savings? And I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not Dave Ramsey. So I can only tell you what I'm doing for myself. And so the little bit of money that we're able to set aside each month, it goes into hard assets. And that means real estate, gold, or Bitcoin. I keep like Dave recommends, I keep a 6 month emergency fund that I
Mm-hmm.
keep it in US dollars. A couple thousand is in cash in a safe
Yeah.
at home that I can get to in a hurry. And then the rest of that emergency fund is it's in those 1 month treasuries that I talked about earlier,
Mm-hmm.
and Treasury Direct. So I can, if I want to, I can just click renew before it renews and it doesn't drop back into my account. Or
Mm-hmm.
if I need that money, I don't do anything, and the default is for it to just kick right back into my checking account.
Yeah.
But that's better than anything you're going to get from the bank, 4%.
Yeah.
On a
Yeah.
on a 1 month treasury. And you just set up it's a Treasury Direct
Yep.
that you set up your account. And but any money that I don't need in the next 3 to 4 years, that is not sitting around in fiat currency,
Yeah.
getting debased by the U.S. debt and monetary creation, which is almost synonymous, as we talked about before. Debt and money supply, they're the same. And and
Mm-hmm.
and debt, it's if it's kicking out 4% interest, it's creating more money, you
Yeah.
know and so that's I think the right now we're spending $1 trillion annually on interest expense.
Interest alone.
And that's
Right.
that's with a lot of that's with a lot of the old long-term debt still being back there when it was at 1% or whatever, and a lot of that stuff's
Mm-hmm.
rolling over. um, so it's rolling over at these higher yields.
Yeah, because if you roll it over from 1% to 4%, it doesn't really sound like a lot when you think about maybe your mortgage. But this is a mortgage on an entire country.
Right.
And you're taking the amount you pay in interest and multiply it by a 4x.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you're talking about real money.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So now we got our body, our budget, and our Bible, and we're looking ahead and we're thinking, wow, this country doesn't look like it's going any place that's going to be sustainable. What do we do?
Yeah. So now we can start getting into all that crazy prepper stuff, right? And at a bare minimum, I think everyone should have a good quality first aid kit at home, and
Yeah.
that's not something you're going to get from Walgreens. Um, what's the name of it? North American Rescue.
North American Rescue.
They
These will
have
be in the show notes too.
okay, yeah. They've got really really good like blood stopper kits. Kind of like a
Yeah.
uh, in the military they call them IFAKs. It's a
Hmm.
individual first aid kit
First aid kit,
that
right?
they'll carry on their gear, and it's got probably a chest seal and a tourniquet, a really good high quality tourniquet,
Hmm.
and some type of really really good compression bandage in there, like Israeli battle dressing, something like that,
Hmm.
because that's the world we live in now. Mass
Yeah.
shootings are every church should have a couple of these around, some kind of blood stopper kit, because
Hmm.
just mass shootings are just they're commonplace now.
Do you think they're more commonplace, or do you think we just hear about them more because of the internet?
Oh no, they're way more commonplace. We've just before Columbine, you never heard about kids getting shot at school,
Yeah.
and now it's every other week. We,
Yeah.
I'm going to go on a rabbit trail.
Okay. Those are good. We love rabbit trails here.
Stop me when it gets crazy.
Okay.
In Isaiah 1, the Bible says God's calling out Israel for turning their back on him and having these corrupt judges and their leadership that love bribes and all of that. And he says,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the things one of the curses for that is, he says, your silver has become dross and your wine mixed with water. In 1963, our corrupt judges decided Abington School District versus Shemp. And that decision took prayer and the Bible out of schools.
Yes.
So God was very quickly replaced with the religion of atheism. Christianity was very quickly replaced with the religion of atheism. Supposedly, we had to get God out because we didn't want to be teaching one religion over another. But immediately we started teaching another religion over Christianity, which was atheism, which is taught through Darwinism, and everything happened from nothing.
Yeah.
So that is a religious worldview.
Mm-hmm.
So those children. So 18 months after that, our silver literally became dross. 1965 was when the last silver coinage was minted in America, and after that, we started using copper and nickel and things that a silversmith, when he purifies the metal, would consider dross.
Yeah.
So our
disposable
silver literally became dross 18 months after the decision. Within that decade, we got the sexual revolution. Children they're not taught about God anymore. They're taught that they're just another they're an evolved animal that just should pursue its animal desires. We got the sexual revolution. We got a bunch of unwanted pregnancies from the sexual revolution. So in 1973, one decade after Abington School District versus decision, we had to do Roe v. Wade because we've got all these unwanted pregnancies.
Yeah.
So here we are 6 decades later, and now we don't know if boys should be allowed to compete in girls' sports, and if boys should be allowed to go in girls' locker rooms, and we can't define what a woman is. So it's no surprise that children go to school and shoot up their teachers and their fellow students and people there's just mass killings everywhere. And it is more, and I think it's demonic. I think it's just that we've opened our minds up to, and our spirits up, and brought these children up to be influenced by this demonic power. Satan's got a very, very clear, focused agenda, and it's kill, steal, and destroy.
Yeah.
And that's part of that.
Yeah, for sure.
Right, so that was the rabbit trail. Where were we?
So the rest of the bees, I think one of the bees you just ran into is maybe you ought to be able to defend yourself.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah, we were talking about first aid kits. Yeah, so first aid kits, some form of
Yeah.
self defense, and at
And that
least
first aid too, that you got to be able to take care. If you think about the response time of 911 to your house,
uh,
and somebody has a cut on their leg from a saw, an axe, a piece of equipment, whatever. If you can't stop the bleeding with a tourniquet, if you don't know how, you should know how. That's what makes you a good parent, a good husband, wife, partner, whatever it is. If you can't take care of those that you love, then you need to work on it like right now.
oh yeah,
Figure
absolutely. And
figure it out.
and then everybody in the home needs to be trained to. So if you should get two of the kits, one just so you can practice with all the equipment in it, and the other one to
Hmm.
have there. I
Yeah.
mean, we've got them in each car. I've got one in my tractor box because that tractor's with me when I'm out cutting wood or doing a lot of dumb stuff that
Yeah.
that could that could end badly.
Yeah.
And then it's also there for when people get stung with bees.
Sure.
My daughter knows where it's at. She can run and grab that. She didn't even have to go. She didn't even have to track mud in the house. When
Yeah.
when another kid gets stung by a bee or gets a little cut or a little boo boo or something, she can just go run and grab that and grab a band aid because sometimes you
Right.
just need a band aid.
Yeah.
Um,
All right.
and then
Um.
you need 3 days of non-perishable food and water. And so that's
Mhm.
just kind of like the very, very basic goal there. And that once you've got that, then I recommend to start trying to build that up to a month's worth of food and water. And then you need to look at the potential threats for the area you live in.
Yeah.
So, do you have earthquakes where you live? Do you have hurricanes, forest fires, floods? Are you in a big city where a BLM riot could burn down your neighborhood?
Yeah.
If you have any of that stuff, you need a pretty good bug out plan.
Yeah.
There's the preppers talk about bug out bags, and these crazy bug out bags that they build are I get it. It's just they're just trying. A lot of that stuff also kind of turns out to be kind of a bug in bag. It's kind of just kind of
Yeah.
where you have all your little prepper supplies, and a lot of that
Yeah.
stuff's very useful. But a bag, an actual go bag, it's mission specific.
Hmm.
It's where are you going, how long are you going to be there, and why are you going. All of that. There's some
Yeah.
common denominators in there. Uh, almost anything you can think of, you're going to need money, and credit
Yeah.
card machines may or may not be working. So you should have cash in there.
Right. Yeah.
Are you coming back to your house or you don't know? Because if it's a hurricane or a flood or a fire or a BLM riot, maybe not.
Yeah.
So you should have all your insurance papers, all your important documents, IDs, um, uh, title to your house, title to your vehicles. All of that stuff should be scanned, should be on a flash drive, should be in the same place as your cash.
Hmm.
you know, and then you should
Yeah.
have a bag that's kind of pre-packed with toiletries and a change of clothes and the stuff that you're going to take to a hotel.
Yeah.
You're not bugging out to the national forest. That's not where we're going. We're going to a hotel
Yeah. Mine's a get
far
home bag.
far away. Yeah. So if we're having to leave our house, we're probably going to a hotel. If
Okay.
you're not going to a hotel, if it's something worse than that, and there's no hotels,
Mm.
you need to have a place to go, because shelter in place is going to be better than leaving home and you don't know where you're
Hmm.
going, because
Especially.
you're not going to go to the national and forest and restart society. If you think you are, then watch the TV show Alone, because
Hmm.
these are professional people that's all they do is survival, and they give them everything they need to go out there and survive, and within 30 days every single one of them cracks like an egg, with very, very
Yeah.
few exceptions. So
Yeah.
that's not going to happen. So if that's
Yeah.
your plan, ditch it and
It's a
start
bad
making a new
plan.
one.
That's a bad plan.
It's a
Yeah.
bad
It's a
plan.
really
Yeah.
bad plan because
Uh-huh.
it does take a community, and we're given we're given the gift of community, and it's how we choose to embrace it and who we bring into it. So you have to be selective, but yeah, you have to have help.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
So a lot of people,
we got beans,
yeah,
and we got and now we have to be able to defend our family. So that one was bullets, right?
uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many people do you think actually go out and practice with a firearm? Not the people we hang with. I'm talking about American society.
I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
I would say probably people that live in this city probably not much, because they got to go to a range and follow range rules, and that just isn't any fun, you know.
Yeah.
So
there is something to
safe.
live in the country.
It's safe, and it's safe, but it's not.
On my blog, I wrote about, I was down at I was doing a shooting tournament down in Salt Lake, and they have the Great Salt Lake Range or whatever it's called. And they have this board of rules as you walk in. And this is it's like 8 feet tall. It's a sign that's 8 feet tall, and it's got literally more than 20 lines of rules. And I'm like, I wonder how many people actually read this.
Yeah.
Because there's so many range rules, you can't do anything.
Yeah.
Anyway, I digress.
Yeah. My 7-year-old had her friends over last week, and we got the BB gun Glock and the BB gun AR-15 and all of that stuff, and they were doing shoot and move drills, and it's basically, don't point the gun at anybody else. Don't put your finger on the trigger. Don't put the finger on the trigger until you're ready to shoot, and eye protection at all times.
Yeah,
because it's a nice ping. The sound of the BB on a metal target, on a steel, you get that instant feedback, and it's fun, and they look exactly like they're exact replicas of the actual firearms. But it's a lot of fun, and it costs a lot less too. BBs.
And to teach, there's something that you don't generally do at the range unless you're working with like USPSA or IDPA or somebody like that. But to shoot and move is a foreign concept.
Yeah.
In American society, but bad guys know how to do it really well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's very there'll be very, very few real life encounters where you're at a bench rest.
Yeah, no kidding. All right, so we got Bible, bullets, beans, bullion, body, budget. What did I miss?
Bugout. So
Bug
kind
out.
of once people hit this basic level of preparedness, they eventually start considering a more self-sufficient lifestyle. And so the more you start to pay attention to our various failing systems, and it's everything. It's education. It's financial. It's government. That our churches are failing. There's so many woke churches that that are just we're supposed to embrace the sinner, but they're embracing the sin. The entertainment industry is just it's just demonic.
Epic mind pollution.
So the more you start to pay attention to all of that, the more you want to reduce your dependency. Food and medicine. We talked about that earlier. That's all broken. The more you want to reduce your dependency on these systems, and this is where folks start to shift from being preppers, and they start this journey. A lot of them towards being homesteaders, and so that means something different for everybody. But folks that started a flock of backyard chickens after COVID, they're pretty happy about not having to pay $10 a dozen for organic eggs. Instead
and you get more eggs than you can use.
And they're recycling their kitchen scraps to be turned into a useful commodity. If you got 5 chickens in the backyard in the suburb, is that going to save your life in an EMP? Probably not. But if you've reduced your dependency from 100% to 99%, it's a step
Mm-hmm.
in the right direction. And whether you're thinking of bugging in and just kind of setting up the place where you're at, or you're starting to
Mm-hmm.
look at um, other properties, the most important consideration is water. If
Yeah.
if power's out and municipal water supplies are shut down or contaminated, where are you going to get water?
Yeah.
Most people
Clean
can.
water.
Yeah, most people can go 3 weeks without food before starvation sets in,
Mm-hmm.
but 3 days without water and it's all over. If you
Yeah,
have
it's going to turn you
a
into somebody else.
yeah,
Yeah.
if you have a
Okay,
local
so go ahead.
yeah, if you have a local fresh water source, a good filter might be the only thing you need. If not, a hand pump on a well is the next best thing.
Yeah.
You can put a water catch system to collect rainwater, but you're hitching your wagon to the weather, and it's still going to need to be filtered.
Yeah.
If storage is your only option, then you need to plan on 2 gallons per person per day, and then once that's gone, you need to figure out where you're going to go, because
To
sheltering in
refill it.
place is not feasible without water.
Yeah.
And if you are looking at purchasing a property, that needs to be your first consideration is a good water source, a clean spring, a spring that's coming out of the water, that's coming out of the ground by itself with no power. That's the best case scenario.
Yeah.
And then a good well that you put a hand pump on, that's kind of second. Um, if you don't
Because
have
there's a
water,
filter at
those.
the bottom of your well. I mean, that's pretty crazy cool.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
right.
All right. So you have written, I'm going to like switch directions
Okay.
now. You've written, is it 44 books or where are we?
It's over 40.
Over 40,
Yeah.
40 some. Okay. So some of the guys up on the mountain, they said, hey, we've got some questions for Mark. And so this is your fans asking the question, including me, but this is their, what's your favorite series? If you look back along all those series, which one do you like the best?
I really enjoyed Days of Lot, which
Okay.
is the last series that I completed.
Right.
Yeah, I really
And
liked that one.
okay. And so that um, was a story of the the seven um, the seven trumpets, seven bowls, seven. So this is basically the wrath of God.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it all get crammed into 3 books, so
Yeah.
it was kind of it really moved fast, and
Okay.
I kind of enjoyed that.
All right.
My
So
other end times books have been like real sagas that have
mhm.
been six or 7 books.
Yeah. So a lot of your books surround things like non-natural disasters, EMPs, pandemics, financial collapse that has been caused by the government or a cashless society or maybe the deep state. A lot of the problems are they're like a predictor of what's coming in the rapture. Why do you think that this type of post-apocalyptic fiction is relevant today? Because you teach in it. I'm gonna tell everybody, like, if you're looking for a spicy novel, this ain't your cup of tea, man. They're cool, and I have listened to. I'm not a Mark Goodwin reader. I'm a Mark Goodwin listener. So and you get better dollars when you sell audibles. So so that's good. But why is it relevant to have post-apocalyptic fiction?
Well, I think the odds of everything that I write about, the odds of it happening are not zero.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if the odds not zero, that means sooner or later it's going to happen. It
Hmm.
may not happen in our lifetimes, but it also it might.
Yeah.
Collectively for the odds of one of those things happening in our lifetime actually starts to get pretty high.
I think so too.
So,
And I'm an old dude, so
yeah, so I think it makes sense to have some knowledge of what the threat might be,
mhm.
and also what would you do if that happened?
Okay. And these are like some of my favorites. Like are are your heroine. I mean, I'm gonna talk about them as a heroine. Ava's Crucible and the Cyber Armageddon series
Mm-hmm.
have. I'm gonna say female heroines, female leads, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
How do you like how'd you like shift from having this superhero to this other gendered superhero or other sex superhero?
Oh, well, one thing, I've got a daughter, and I want her to be courageous and strong and independent. And I don't want her to feel like she has to compete against men in everything, but I want her to feel uh, capable and there. I fear she's not going to have a whole lot of great choices for
Spouses.
yeah. Although
Yeah,
we've got some really really great families in our homeschool group, so
yeah.
I do have hope, but but uh, when I look around at the world in general, I want her to be able to take care of herself. And so
Yeah.
I think there's an element of me kind of projecting that onto her future, and then something that I hope she's going to read when she gets older, and see that a girl doesn't always have to have uh, uh, sometimes a girl doesn't have a man to defend her, and if she doesn't,
Hmm.
then she needs to be able to take care of business.
Yeah.
My daughter's she's 7, and she needs one more stripe before she gets her next belt in jujitsu. She can
Nice.
she can run that BB pistol and shoot that BB AR from prone, and
And,
she can identify plants that are edible in the wilderness, and edible
yeah.
mushrooms, and you know um, she's got she can plant a garden, and as soon as her feet get a little bit longer, she's going to be able to drive a tractor, and all of that kind of stuff, so
Awesome. Awesome.
so I'm
So,
I'm raising her up. I'm raising her up to be able to do all those kind of things, and then I'd like to have those stories that she can read when she gets older, to reinforce everything that I've taught her, that she can do it.
right on, right on. That sounds like you value someone who is capable.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, for sure. And wouldn't it be wonderful if we all said that we raised children who were capable? That would be terrific. That would be
Yeah.
terrific.
Mhm.
So of your favorite series,
And she invests in gold and Bitcoin also. So
all she can. Your favorite series, Days of Lot. Days of Lot.
uh,
And we kind of got the why. What's your favorite book? If you had a single book you had to pick, that was your favorite as an author
that I've read,
that
or that
you've
I've
that you've
written.
written, that you've written. You got a lot to pick up, man. You got 40 some books. Or what's the most successful one you've had?
The Days of Noah, that series has absolutely been the most successful.
And that was like almost like right out of the gate, wasn't it? And one
Um,
of your earliest works.
yeah, I think so. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Second series. I I
Okay.
I really liked the first book in my new series. I guess maybe it's still kind of fresh in my mind. I'm still
Yeah.
working on that series and everything. So I like those characters, but it's Kingdom Come, and it's Behold a White Horse, and it's
Mm-hmm.
really really kind of deviated from a lot of the other stuff, and it looks at the kind of last days deception, and the possibility of demons disguised as aliens. um,
Yeah.
I think all throughout time, when you go back to whether that's the Egyptians or the Mayans or all of this, I think that they've had demons disguising themselves as gods
Yeah.
from other worlds. And I think that makes sense, that's probably what we're going to see in the last days. And we've had congressional hearings on UAP and all of that, and a
Hmm.
lot of things that are coming out about the what the government knows, and what kind of technology they have, and I think it's very, very possible that that's going to be a part of that. So I really enjoyed write, writing that first book, and I'm really having fun with the series. And then
Yeah. So, and to let people know, because you're not like putting it on full disclosure, but this is a great story about a very flawed person who's a pilot
uh-huh,
who maybe drinks too much and doesn't have his family in their priority.
right,
And there's lots of issues and problems. And as a bit of a spoiler alert, but he loses his wife, and it's just all kind of not good.
right,
And
yeah, yeah,
so
and
from
the
that,
little
he's
bit,
rising out of the ashes, right?
yeah, yeah, and then the little bit of the few people that are quote unquote Christians that he runs into are just they're horrible people,
Yeah.
you know. And so, everything he's learned so far about Christianity is just a turnoff, and
Yeah.
and he doesn't see why he would ever want to be like these hypocrites.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
hopefully,
Which is
hopefully
kind
in a
of
later
maybe a
book,
reflection.
hopefully in a later book, he's gonna run into somebody real, and see how different that person is from some of these mega church pastor that he's ran
Yeah.
into, and some other folks like that.
Well, I'm betting on it. So, so then there's that. What about as you look back on the characters you've written about? There are some incredible characters who actually wind their way through a number of books, and that's really the series are kind of centered around not only a concept but a character. Who is one of your characters that stands out after a couple of decades of?
Oh, I think Emilio from the beginning of tribulation,
Hmm.
the the beginning of sorrows, and then
Yeah.
he's the knucklehead that gets left behind after the rapture,
Yeah.
and then he becomes our main protagonist for the Kingdom of Darkness series.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
really liked him because he had a
Yeah.
really good journey, you know,
Yeah.
because he
And
saw himself
worldwide
as
journey.
he sees himself as a good person, because he's in law enforcement. He's trying to do the right thing, and you know,
Hmm.
and he's one of the good guys, and he's not really maybe he's not perfect, but he's not what you would he didn't think of himself as a sinner,
Yeah.
until he
Yeah.
gets left behind.
Certainly. Certainly. Okay. Which of your books has been? I mean, I want to say the most successful, but I actually want to look at back and which one have fans responded to you? It's because you. I mean, you don't have. I mean, a lot of authors would say I have a great following, but you have something deeper than that. It's an incredibly passionate following that they're waiting for you. Like, get off your tush and write another book, man.
Yeah, yeah. Well, all glory to God for that.
Yeah, but he gave you a talent. You're putting it to use.
Yeah.
And what is your fan favorite? What do people call you and say? I'm glad you wrote this one, and fill in that blank.
I guess it's Days of Noah.
Yeah, just numerically and probably in terms of content or what?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Because I have, so I pulled a 45-year-old cowboy and I said, "What's your favorite?" And now understand that he is a cowboy, and
Mhm.
his was Seven Cows, Ugly and Gaunt, and that's a series of what,
Yeah.
5 books? Five, one,
4. Uh-huh.
three, 4 books.
Yeah.
And that is, again, that's one of your early books. But then I talked
Uh-huh.
to this younger fellow, and he loves the Days of Lot, and like there's a big spread between those series
Yeah.
in terms
Yeah.
of time.
Hmm.
Yeah. So tell us a bit about Seven Cows. What
Yeah.
did you like about that?
That was so yeah, so that's Danny, and he has starts having these, he gets saved and immediately starts having prophetic dreams, and he goes to talk to his pastor, and his pastor refers him to a a, a mental health professional that can maybe help him get on some type of medication to help him not have those awful dreams anymore, because in Second Timothy it talks about the people that profess to be godly, but they deny its power,
Yeah.
and we've just the modern church, it's either on one extreme that's like so far down this rabbit hole of emotionalism, or
Hmm.
or they're on this other extreme where all of the gifts of the spirit were they perished with the
Yeah.
apostles,
Right.
and it's hard. It's very, very difficult for a new Christian to navigate those waters and to find a good, decent church that believes what the Bible says.
What's actually
It's
written, right?
it's tough. It's tough,
Yeah.
and so he's going through all of that, but then he finally gets a mentor that kind of walks him through this, and then he realizes these prophetic dreams are about an event where God's going to bring judgment on America for all the aborted babies,
Mm.
and for turning their back on him, and so he starts taking this message to anybody that'll listen, and he gets some time on some radio shows and things like that, and then he starts he convinces his family to kind of kick in, and they start setting up his grandmother's old farm
Yeah.
to
And
ride
that's
it
kind of a
out.
common theme as well, right?
Uh-huh.
Through your books. I mean, because you can't be around a lot of people and
Yeah, I
have
mean, you're gonna have
chaos
to
and
have some. I mean,
anarchy
I've had
and
I've had people
survive.
I've had people write me and say, "Hey, can you write a book about somebody that they don't have the money, and they don't have anywhere to go, and they're stuck in the city, and what they go?" It's like, well, that would be that wouldn't be
No,
it.
that's impossible.
Yeah, I can, but it's going to be called a short story,
Yeah.
and it's going to end badly.
Awesome.
So
Awesome.
it's just, you know, there's a,
So, yeah, so you wrote about a pandemic in the
uh,
American Wasteland series.
yeah,
And that, so as I look at the timing of that, you were writing that kind of, or you at least had the ideas for it. Was it before the with the global pandemic
oh
of
no, it
COVID
was it was
19
kind of I
began?
was kind of writing it in real time as everything was happening. Just
Okay.
I was just trying to project it forward. Like, okay,
Yeah.
the next thing.
Yeah.
Now,
And that all
Ava's Crucible, that was about a stolen election that I wrote, um,
that's right.
like 4 years before the stolen election.
Okay. All right. And then you talk a little bit about and I think it's the black swans. Tell our folks what a black swan is.
Yeah, so a Black Swan event is just it's kind of just it could be anything that's um, it could be natural, or it could be man made. Um, it could be something that's not, that people aren't really looking for it to happen.
Yeah, it's an event.
9/11 was a 9/11 was a black swan event.
Yeah, not forecastable,
Right.
apparently. That's another
The
story now.
pandemic, regardless
Yeah,
of where whether you think it was a natural or a man-made disaster,
yeah,
was a black swan because 99.9% of the population was not looking for that.
right. And I
Uh
think it's pretty clear now that that was a manufactured event,
huh.
and our own government was a participant in it. But that's
Uh
another story.
Funded it.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then when we talk about some of your other series, there's like Cyber Armageddon, which was really one of my favorites.
Uh,
This is where a virus comes into our U.S. banking computer system
yeah.
and just collapses us. Now, if you went to the bank and they were closed and the cash machine didn't work, how long is the average American going to make it? Like 3 days, maybe?
Oh yeah. So I think the first 24 hours is going to be that period where people are just trying to figure out what's going on, and then I think the by the second day people are looting stores and killing each other, and then probably within 2 weeks you're hearing rumors of cannibalism.
Yeah. And I think if people look at what happens, like a power outage or a snowstorm, and
Mm.
just think of how fast your local Walmart grocery store, convenience store shelves are just gone and empty. And if you include that there's any transportation difficulties at all, they can't be refilled. And you're not thinking about having, at minimum 72 hours worth of food for your family. You're not very responsible.
No, no, I don't think so.
Yeah. And the reason that I think that and the reason I think you ought to do it is because you love your family. That's number one. That's absolutely number one. We're called to love and care for our families, and if
And
we don't,
provide.
yeah, and provide. Yeah,
Paul says anyone that doesn't provide for their own family is worse than a pagan or an unbeliever.
yeah,
That's a harsh
pretty low
criticism.
bar.
It's a pretty harsh criticism, and I don't,
So when
and
you look ahead, do
what are
you
you
think?
supposed to provide? I think Maslow's hierarchy gives you, kind of show,
Yeah,
shows you, what our needs are. I think that's what you're responsible for, and that's, that's your that's prioritized for you.
awesome. So, as I look down the road and I see the natural disasters that are starting to happen, we just saw Etna blew up again in Italy. We're hearing of earthquakes in places that there haven't been earthquakes. We've got
Wars and rumors of wars.
roars and rumors of wars. But I mean, just add on to that the stuff that's natural for starters, and you go, wow, they had a little fire out in L.A. I don't know if you heard about it yet.
Oh yeah.
like, like this is at an unprecedented level. And
We had a
so
little rain here in the mountains.
yeah, yeah, and mudslides and rock slides and volcanoes and earthquakes and tsunamis and floods and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It seems to me that the incidence of natural disasters is ballooning. Do you see that?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I think so.
Okay. And then you talk about man made biological industrial accidents like farms on fire, which is happening again at a pretty unprecedented level. We're more aware of terrorism than ever before. And yet we've got people coming over our border in the previous years, at least, especially along the Darien Gap, where they're introducing Chinese enemy combatants to thousands per day.
Hmm.
What's next?
And a lot of Muslim extremists that
Hmm.
have come through the Darien and across the Mexican border.
Yeah.
That
So what?
the intelligence community is actively tracking. and a lot of speculations coming out from folks that have Sarah Adams. She was a CIA analyst, and she's
Mm-hmm.
been on some podcasts talking about kind of this next massive 9/11 that would sort of mimic the October 7th attacks, but here in America.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so scary stuff.
Scary stuff. So does that give you material going forward?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, there's
How
never
many books are you
there's
looking ahead?
well, I don't know. It's one series at a time, and it's just kind of it's wherever I feel like the spirit's leading me, or whatever God gives me to write. That's kind of the thing I have to write.
Okay. Um, uh, what advice would you give our readers? You've written a couple of nonfiction books, The 7-Step Survival Plan.
Uh-huh.
That's available, I believe, at no cost. Is that
Yeah,
right?
yeah. You can go to prepperrecon.com. That's my website.
Okay.
It's got all my books that hyperlinked on there. And at the very top of the page, there's a banner you click. It says "Get your free PDF 7-Step Survival Plan." Click that. Click that PDF and put in your email, and I'll send you a free copy of the 7-Step Survival Plan. It's a great thing for folks that are just getting started out to kind of to start with the most important things, and then work your way up to the crazy prepper stuff.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it gives it
a
all
lot
in
of people.
bite-sized chunks, so you don't feel so overwhelmed, and you don't know where to start. So,
Yeah.
that's why I wrote that.
A lot of people would hear our conversation and it may tend to generate some fear.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's your intent, is it? It's not mine. I don't think it's yours either, is it?
No, and I'm not afraid, but I mean, I think that there's you don't have to look around very far, read too many news articles to have some legitimate concern. And I think if you're sticking your head in the sand, I think that's moronic.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's not, I talk quite frequently about embrace uncertainty because the only thing that is certain is uncertainty.
Yeah.
And there are changes that are dramatic that are coming to our country, our city, state, country, world. And they're pretty forecastable. We don't know which one's going to happen, but some of them are happening even now, and they're not all good. But we don't have to be afraid. Why is that?
Well, because what we talked about at the beginning,
There
this
you go.
isn't our home. We're not gonna be here forever. We're here for a few years, and then forever somewhere else. And if you get that straightened out, you're gonna have a good forever. And if you don't,
Yeah.
you're gonna have a bad forever.
Yeah. Well, Mark, you have lived a big life, and one of the things that we talk about with our guests is always about champions. This is Grandpa Chats with Champions,
Mhm.
but you've had a champion that affected your life in such a dramatic way that you can't help talk about them right now. So, who is that significant person
Oh,
and why?
Jesus, for sure.
Uh huh.
Yeah.
Okay. And why?
Well, he reached down. I was in the mud and the mire, and he reached down and he picked me up out of that, out of alcohol addiction and drug addiction, and set my feet upon the
Mm,
rock and gave me a firm place to stand, gave me a reason to live, and has given me like just this beautiful life that I don't deserve. Writing books and going on podcasts like yours, and talking to people, and a beautiful family, and just this incredible story of redemption, and so that's why a lot of my characters are these very highly flawed people that
mm-hmm.
that just have to they just have to bust their head against bad decisions for book after book after book, and then they meet Jesus, and then they still bump their head against bad decisions for book after
Yeah.
book after book, but in that latter stage, they're doing it with grace, and they're learning from the head bumps instead of just making the same mistake over and over. They make new mistakes in each book.
Yeah. Yeah. And isn't that a picture of real life?
Yeah.
I mean, if we were not given grace, we wouldn't have a picture of what's coming, and we know what's coming. And to sit and throw our crowns at the feet of Jesus is going to be awesome, man. I look forward to seeing you there.
Yeah. Amen. Amen.
All right. Thanks for coming on the show. And folks, I got to tell you, until next time, I want you to keep looking for those Grampian-sized dreams, and don't follow your heart. Get in the Word and figure it out for yourself, just like Mark told us. Mark Goodwin, thanks for coming on the show. This is Jim, and I am out. When you get an opportunity, subscribe or follow wherever you get your podcast.